Welcome to Minute to Win It Revit 2025 edition. I have been giving this presentation or a version of it since, probably 2018. And I think I have something like 120 tips on my master list. So getting it down into 15 or 20 for today was a challenge. I thought about trying to get 40 tips into 40 minutes, but no, I don't need to be the podcast on 2x speed today. When I'm done here, I will put a link to my AU presentation from last year, Minute to Win It Revit 2024 edition. Anybody remember the game show still? Can I still keep using this title?
It's a bit of a stretch, probably.
All right. But anyway, we'll dive in and see what we got here. So I like these tips because they are tiny. They do not take an hour to understand. And the first one that I'm going to try to show, let's see if I can. There we go. All right. This is a weird one. It can be really confusing if you have never run across it before, or if you're not sure what to look for. So view range, right? I hope everybody's familiar with the basics of the view range dialog, but floors are weird. I have a floor selected in this image. It's 9 foot 11 inches below the level. The bottom offset of the view range is 6 feet and the view depth is 8 feet. So why is my floor at 10 feet still visible? Well, it turns out that any floor within 4 feet of the view range's bottom offset will show up in the view, even if it's outside the primary range, even if it's outside the view depth. Revit thinks you still want to see it. The only way to change that are to either change the bottom offset, or if you can't do that because you need it for other elements, you have to manually hide the floor. I hate manually hiding elements in Revit, but sometimes like this, it actually is your only option. Alrighty, there's a blog post floating around there that is something like 33 reasons why you can't see something in Revit. This is one of those reasons. If you're trying to figure out why you can't see a section or detail view on a plan or other referring view, it might be this property called hide at scales coarser than. It's a really handy one because it prevents your small details from showing up on bigger plans. So this section 6 here will not be displayed on an 1/8 inch scale plan. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not. You'll have to decide which setting for each section and detail instance, which scale will work for you. All right, I know that this has happened to all of us. The view title is longer than the line under the view itself. I have caught far too many people hitting space, 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 just to try to force the word wrap. Yeah, don't do that, please. The view schedules, it messes with your view schedules. Instead, if you use Control plus Enter, you can manually add a line break. Won't mess up your view schedules. Drawings look nice. The bonus tip, you can do this in schedules too. Control Enter will force a line break in a schedule as well. This one's more of a personal preference than a tip, but I think a lot of you might share that preference. This is, of course, the Revit status bar, and the icon that I have highlighted is to drag elements on selection. So if this tip is on, like it is in the top, when you press and drag your mouse, it will select and move anything you were hovering over at the time. So if you hover over it to highlight and click and drag, it's going to drag that. Sometimes that's what you want. It saves you a click, but it can be really annoying in crowded areas. If you accidentally are highlighting a linked file, if you have families that have big bounding boxes, you'll drag stuff you didn't mean to. So I always turn it off, and then a click and drag starts a selection window every time. Another personal preference that I suspect a lot of people share, double-click edit options. If you're double-click happy occasionally like me, you can actually choose what happens when you double-click on certain objects. If you don't want to open the family editor every time you accidentally double-click on something, yeah, you can set that double-click action to do nothing. The alternatives to the default settings are always either edit type or do nothing. except I guess views wouldn't edit type, but I like all the defaults except that family one. I've clicked on far too many things and find myself in the family editor. But as always, your method may vary. Selecting tag hosts. Anybody ever have trouble telling which object a tag is referencing? Then this tip is for you. Select the tag, click Select Host on that contextual modify tab, and the selection focus will switch to the tagged element. I like this a lot for tags that have been accidentally dragged away from their hosts. Like if there's something floating in space, you can select the tag, select host, and decide whether you need to put the tag back where it belongs or just delete it. All right, I'm showing you this tip. I do it every time, but you have to promise me that you will never use it for any number except 0. Okay? Scout's honor, promise, please? Okay. All right, let's go. Usually, if you put a number in a dimensions replaced with text, Revit will complain, right? Like it doesn't want to, it doesn't want to see this, right? It wants, if you're going to override a number, Revit wants you to override it with something like, verify in field. But there can be good reasons to show an offset, and I left out the second half of this slide. So that's going to be fun. So you don't get an image for this one, but if you right click in the replace with text field, if you right click, there will be an option for UNC characters. You can put in a non-breaking space, you can put in anything you like, and then Revit will accept the number. Once again, don't make your colleagues hate me, please. 0 inches is the only one that I've ever found a good excuse for using this override. Sorry about that. Alrighty, spell check. Moving on to spell check and annotations. You can't spell check an entire Revit model. I wish. This tip will get you a little bit closer. If you select one text element and then use select all instances in entire project, you can then run check spelling on the whole batch. Unfortunately, you have to do this one at a time with each text style. So you see I have one here with an arrow and one here with a dot. But it's faster than doing it one view at a time. Unfortunately, I still don't have any tips for schedules, dimensions, or families. Still waiting on that one, but we will come back a little bit to spell check later. All right, I think my modeling, yep, good, is going here. All right, keyboard shortcuts in Revit. I love it. You can use the space bar to rotate and flip elements either prior to placing them or when selecting them later. You can even, as with this column, hover over a reference and it will snap to that reference. So I love this for odd angles and tricky geometry. So if you don't know exactly what wall this is, I don't know, but you can snap and get it to match exactly. An exterior wall. This may not be as much of a problem for my architect friends who often might have a finish to help them visually see which side of the wall is the wall's exterior. But on the structural side, I get confused a lot of the time because is the wall in this image aligned to its interior face or its exterior face? Turns out Revit gives us a hint. The flip arrows are always on the exterior side. So now, just by looking at the wall, I can tell that its location line is the interior face. Let's talk schedules. I've got a bunch of tips for schedules, just a few here today. If you select a row in a schedule, your contextual tab will give you highlight in model. When you click that, you can use it to open views containing those elements. So if you're ever wondering, why is that in this schedule? This will help you figure it out. This, the show element in view dialog always displays, even if you've only selected one 2D element that can only exist in one view, and that's fine, it'll still show up, but you can just close it. This is, once upon a time was a new tip in this presentation. It's a few years old at this point. Revit 2022 gave us the ability to split text-based schedules across sheets. My structural friends have been able to split graphical column schedules for much longer than that, but 2022 got us text-based schedules. So if you right-click on the schedule in the project browser, love those right-click tools, you find Split and Place. You choose your destination sheets, place the schedule, and then those new segments show up in the project browser. It's a nice extra visual hint that something exists on multiple sheets. If you need to adjust the divisions later, there is a blue circular grip at the bottom of each segment. The same way kind of grip that you would use if you were splitting the schedule into segments on the same sheet. So just remember, if you're doing this and your schedule is split across sheets, you got to check the other sheets to see what happens when you change that grip. Revision clouds. Let's talk about revisions. Let's say there's a revision that you don't want to show on your sheets because you need to issue the response to RFI 103, but you've got some information that is coming for RFI 120 later. But you don't want to see that tag yet. So a couple of options. You could temporarily delete the clouds and then undo them to bring them back after you print your sheets. It technically works, pretty risky. You can also use a PDF editor to modify the title block after you print. Again, it would work, but then you have to do the work in the PDF and you have to do it every time you print. So instead, my favorite method is to blank out the revision number and the date and the description in the revisions dialog, set the show column to none. I will put the information from the date and description in the issued to and issued by fields, which you can get away with that if those aren't actually in your schedule, in your title block. For us, they usually aren't. That helps you remember later what the revision was supposed to be for. Nothing deleted, nothing to restore. Skipping over to phases, I've got a couple things that will help you collaborate with others when working with phases in Revit models. If you have a linked model in your file that does not have the same phase names or the same number of phases as your model, you can go to the links type properties and then the phase mapping dialog to define the relationship. So in this case, my model has existing phase 1 and new construction. The linked model just has existing and new construction. So I've decided that for this particular model, the link's new construction is the same as my phase 1. And here's the other thing for phases that is absolutely critical for coordination between design team members on a phased project. In order for a phase filter to work on a linked model, that phase filter must exist in both the host and the link. So if you have customized your phase filters in any way, please tell your team, all of them. Like the 3 that are highlighted in this image are not in the default template. At least they certainly weren't at the time I created the image. So, because you see we have existing and we have show existing plus demo, and then a little ways down is show previous and demo. So if I want somebody else to be able to use these filters, they have to put them in their model, or more correctly, if I want their model to obey my phase filter names, they have to put those phase filters in their model as well. They can have whatever settings they want as far as graphic overrides, but the phase has to exist. Highly recommend putting that in your BIM coordination plan if it's not there already. My last of the non-Revit 2025 tips today is actually, I got this from a Revit DC user group meeting way back when from our good friend, Dana DiFilippi. Borrowed it ever since and given her credit ever since. If you have ever wanted to know who created a particular element, Hopefully it's because you want to give them a compliment on their modeling skills, but maybe not. Revit will let you do that. If you turn on one of the work sharing display options, doesn't matter which one, hover over that element and you will get a pop-up with the element creator's name and the last person to update the element. So in this case, I own the object, but my colleague Eliza is the one who made the floor. Now, if you have to recreate your central file for any reason, this all gets reset and everything gets assigned to the person who recreates the central file. But in the meantime, good luck with your detective work. All right, I promised the Revit 2025 edition, so here we go. First up, in context spell check. I said we were coming back. It's here. AutoCAD has had this for years. Finally, it's Revit's turn. If you have a typo, it will now get a red underline when you are editing the text element. It's only there while you're editing it, goes away otherwise, so you still have to pay attention, but I think this is progress. You will also note that this is only for 2025.3, so if you haven't done those minor upgrades yet, you might want to think about that. This is for anybody who is picky about lining up their text elements in a view. You can now select multiple tags, multiple keynotes, multiple text elements, multiples of all of them you can mix and match, and align them by their left, their right, or their centers. You can even use the two icons on the right next to the filter funnel to distribute the annotations evenly across a horizontal or a vertical space. This has been like, anybody who likes things nice and tidy and lined up, this one's for you. Another little one from 2025, if you have ever had trouble finding a specific parameter in the properties palette, here's something that they've added to help those of us out. You can sort the entries within each section, so not the whole properties palette, but within each section, you can now sort them alphabetically, A to Z, Z to A. Once you found what you needed, you can also return it to the default order. That's the icon on the left. Since sometimes you or your BIM managers, you probably put the properties in a specific order for a reason, so they don't destroy the default order once it's here. Next up, anybody out there ever needed the same sheet number in phase 1 and phase 2, as an example, but with different content on each sheet? It's rare, but it's happened to me. And have any of you perhaps resorted to using, I don't know, a random non-printable character in order to trick Revit into accepting the duplicate sheet numbers? Yeah, I hope not, but I won't tell if you did. Regardless, those days are over with 2025. If you right-click in the sheet section of the project browser, you can create a new sheet collection. Sheets within that collection still have to have unique numbers, but sheets in different collections can have the same number. I don't promise that you won't get confused still with this, but I think it's a step forward, eliminating some workarounds. You can see in that I have two collections, one for phase 1 and one for phase 2, and they have different cover sheets with the same number. All right, last but not least, it's a tiny tip, but one that could be a time saver. You can now export your PDF files in the background, enabling you to keep working in the model while Revit exports the files. On the one hand, I am sorry to take away your excuse for a coffee break while you export your set, but on the other hand, it might save you when you're trying to print something and keep working. I've only scratched the surface of the stuff that's available in 2025, but these are the things that I thought I could explain in a minute or less.